Give me a sec. Okay, there we go. So my first task is to turn it over to Linda, who is a facilitator and board member of the Climate Psychology Alliance and will be facilitating our meeting today. So over to you, Linda.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. It's great to see such a spread of organisations across the country of different people coming to find out about this. So what we've got today, just to lay out today, we've got, after a couple of minutes of introduction, I'll hand over to Ben Long. Ben is the Director of Public Engagement at the National Emergency Briefing. He's going to spend a few minutes just outlining where we are at the moment and the purpose of the briefing, and then answer any questions. And then we'll hand over to Kate, who, as you know, is the Director of Greener Henley, and she's going to be talking about the model that Greener Henley have been adopting. And she will just reinforce that this is not a prescription. This is a sharing of a model that's been used and going to be used to host the People's Emergency Briefing. And then we'll have some Q&A. And then at the end, towards the end, we'll look at next steps and actions. And so today will not necessarily feel complete for everybody. There may be some outstanding questions that are left. So we're going to set up a Google document for you to put any questions in that aren't answered. And those will be shared with Kate and myself, and we'll look at those later, and Ben. For the session, we're asking people to stay on silent just because there's a large number of you with your mics off. But if you have questions, if you'd like to note them as we go along, and just write them down, and then we can try and handle them at the end, as many as we can. I think that's all for now. Is there anything else I want to say? That's it. I'm going to now hand over to Ben Long. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you all on here. Thanks for making the time this afternoon. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the NEB, the film of the NEB, what that's going to look like, and also how we're distributing it and how we're running our own discussion sessions that are associated with the film screenings that are going to be taking place across the UK. And then I can take some quick questions. So the NEB, I'm sort of imagining most of you know that the NEB took place in November last year in Westminster Central Hall with various experts talking about all aspects of the climate and nature crisis and impacts on the UK. The People's Emergency Briefing is the film that's arising out of the NEB briefing. And just to very briefly outline what that looks like, this is the kind of second phase of the NEB process. So the film is being shot and edited. Well, it's being edited at the moment, and it's going to involve footage from experts speaking at the podium and also talking to camera backstage about their own personal reasons for doing what they do. And then we've got various people sitting on a sofa with Chris Packham watching this footage of the briefing and responding to it on a kind of human level. So we're taking the high level science of the briefing and starting to translate it into something more human, more approachable, more at the level of people's everyday lived experiences. And that's being edited, as I say, at the moment. It's been backed by an amazing load of donations via a crowdfunder, which has raised £150,000. Making these films is frighteningly expensive, and in fact the total cost is even more than that, but that's because we're making it to broadcast quality. And the idea now is that we get this out across communities all over the UK. And it's being shown because of the way we're distributing it, which is via partner networks who are sharing it with their member bases, and then local organisers taking up the screening process and organising screenings in their local village halls or faith spaces or union offices. So it's going out to a wide range of people, and because of that, it's going to be end up being shown in a very diverse range of contexts. And we think this is really part of the strength of this whole model, is that we're getting out via the usual sort of NGOs, climate and nature space. There are real kind of bread and butter, obviously, but also we're reaching out into non-climate, non-nature, civil society. So we're talking to faith groups and sports groups and unions, Rotary clubs, the WI, councils. So we're aiming here to get real breadth of engagement, because we think that's how you bring about the change that I'm sure we all want to see. And in addition, we've got sector initiatives going on. So, for example, a group of educators have got together to use NEB materials to get it into schools and into teaching bodies, to train teachers about how they best can deal with this kind of issue when it arises in the classroom. So the result of this very wide approach, and deliberately very wide approach, is that it looks like we've got over 1,000 screenings already in the pipeline being organised by local organisers. And in addition, a whole number of screenings that are being organised by, for example, unions and healthcare and faith groups, which aren't yet showing up in that number. So we think we're well on the route to maybe 2,000 screenings as it stands, and we're working to keep building that number to try and create this real national moment of discussion and engagement. So just to run you through the event format, we're going to be producing a screening handbook, which is being drafted as I speak and will be available very soon. And within that gives screening organisers all the granular detail that they need to know to host their own screenings. Within that, there's a facilitation guide about how we run the discussion part of these screenings, because the events are going to be divided essentially into two parts. The first part will be the film, which is 45 to 50 minutes, depending on the final edit length, and then a discussion component. And the discussion component is where we think the sort of magic happens on this. We've been working with some brilliant people, including Linda at the Climate Psychology Alliance, in terms of thinking about how best to give communities an opportunity to, I guess, respond to what they've seen in the briefing. Obviously, the content of the briefing contains some fairly alarming things, and we don't want to kick anyone out into the night unsupported with that. So it's very much about creating a listening space for people to engage with the materials, to turn to their neighbours, and to start conversations about what they think the best form of community response will be. So within the guide, there's going to be this guidance on how to run a session that looks something like that. But we're also recognising that, you know, we're talking about a wide range of very diverse contexts here, and people who are organising locally will have the best sense of how to organise that component of their screening event. So there are local organisers who are arranging things differently to that, and I just want to flag that, because that's what we're all here to listen to today, is what's been called the Greener Henley model, which takes a slightly different approach. So the idea of our sort of standard vanilla model on this is that we create, you know, this listening moment that starts a community conversation in a very warm and friendly context, and that maps the beginnings of a route to community action. And I should say as well that part of the format of our event, we are working with Bath University, who have brilliant academic Lorraine Whitmarsh there working on climate communication, and we are building a sort of questionnaire component, which will be able to be scanned via a QR code at the beginning of the session. There'll be various questions which can be answered, which indicate where people are at on this issue. And then there'll be a second QR that comes at the end of the session, where people can answer another set of questions. We think this can be super helpful for doing two things. The first is demonstrating efficacy of the process. And the second thing is for getting really granular local detail on where the public is at on this issue. We think we could end up with a really big sample size out of this if people engage with this, given the number of screenings that are being queued up. And what that would be super useful for is being able to, you know, separate it out as a constituency level set of data and go to the MP and say, hey, you know, this is what your constituents think. This many of your constituents are saying these things. So that could be super helpful in terms of nudging MPs towards action and demonstrating that we can reassure them that there is community support for much more vigorous action on climate and nature. And just talk for a second about our sort of call to action. The NEB has got a very specific remit. It's focused on information, on Parliament and on legislation. But it also recognises that community activity is central to political outcomes. You know, we don't get the change we want to see centrally unless communities really feel able to engage and take action at a local level. So our call to action is centred around what we're calling a parliamentary call for government to stage a televised emergency briefing, which will brief the whole country via a prime-time TV broadcast. So that the whole country can share in the information that was shared at Westminster, and then will be also in the film in these screenings. But that's kind of our system boundary, as it were. That's our ask. But we recognise that obviously local organisers will have their own agendas and will have their own specific things they want to talk about in a local context, and their own means for, or their own ways of engaging people to take part in that local activity. So built into every one of these screening events is an opportunity for local organisers to input their position on that as well. So that's the macro picture. Yeah, today you're going to be hearing obviously about the Greener Henley approach, slightly different to what I've outlined, but the facilitation guide that we supply will be that format that I've just outlined. The one thing I would just say before I wrap up is that our ask is that if you are planning on hosting a screening, that you sign up on the NEB website so that we can get all the relevant details to you. And that's whether you're approaching it in the Greener Henley model of an invited audience, or whether you're approaching it in the way that we're outlining in our handbook. And I'll pop the link for signing up to host a screening in the chat in a second so that everyone can see that. Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. We only have time for 1 or 2 questions, and we're slightly very tight on time today. So I wonder if anyone's got a particular question, if they could put their hand up and I'll have a look. Anyone got any questions? Robert. Hi, Robert.
Hello, Linda. Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, Ben, well, I'll just get down to it. I think we all know that when change of the scale that we're talking about comes, it seldom comes from the system that's created the problem. And so if the NEB's objective, sort of end goal, is to get policy change, which of course is great and is part of the picture, does that not somehow preclude local action? And maybe this is what Kate's coming on to talk about, I don't know. But it seems to me that if we galvanise the response through the screening of the film, then one of the things that we might expect out of that is to have a local group that would form from leaders from all of the different arenas, and that together we would start having some sort of local plan that we would be acting upon. Is there any sense that the NEB can help to sort of shape what that might look like, or is that very much just down to us locally?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think that certainly what's going to be really key in terms of the built-in infrastructure of the screenings is that there is a route to people finding each other and linking up in order to do the ongoing work that's obviously going to be necessary here. Now, we have to be careful not to overstep our mark in terms of defining what all of that ongoing work may be, because of course it's going to be very wide and varied and also locally dependent on the local context. So a key part of what we're trying to do here is to facilitate those groups linking up, joining up with each other and providing a route for that, so that the later work can happen, but without defining every facet of what that later work might look like.
Thank you. And over to Rupert. Hi, Rupert.
Hi, folks. Thanks, Linda. So my question is really a follow-up to Rob's question. Is there a risk that keeping the ask to being a national ask, a Westminster-focused ask, and an ask, moreover, that is fairly unlikely to be granted, that we leave people feeling somewhat de-agentialized, not ready for and engaging in some kind of meaningful action that feels part of them building some kind of alternative? I appreciate that you don't want to dictate to local areas what they do and stuff, but wouldn't it be helpful to do something like say, okay, so we're asking you to do this national thing, and what we'd also love you to do is to make sure that you go away from this intending to do some local thing together as well. And we're not going to tell you what that is, but that could in some way be part of the actual call to action. Because if it's not part of the actual call to action, then it somehow seems kind of subsidiary, when arguably partly for the reasons Robert has given, it's actually more important.
Yeah, thanks, Rupert. Thanks for that question. It's good to see you. In terms of the likelihood or otherwise of the outcome, let's just address that first. I think that I'm not convinced it is unlikely. I think that actually all we're asking for is something eminently reasonable, which is for government to share information. And the non-partisan, non-party political aspect to that should make it a lower hurdle for them to jump over than perhaps some more policy-specific asks. in terms of local agency, I 100% agree with you. You know, local agency is completely key here. And in political work that I've done previously, coordinating a particular campaign, what we learned there was that actually, you know, when you can provide a pathway for people to engage locally around issues that seem to be centred on Westminster, people really quickly realise actually how powerful they are as constituents. It's something we're always encouraged to forget, but it's completely inaccurate. We're incredibly powerful. It's the things that we do locally that then go on to define A, who we return to Westminster, and B, what they do once they get there. And I think there's a whole narrative which kind of like disempowers local activity, when in fact local activity is absolutely key. So one of the things that we're planning on building into this whole screening handbook and our guidance about what communities can go on to do afterwards is the idea of actually, and I won't go into the details of it now for want of time, but it's a method for people to go out into their communities to engage with other people in their communities about popular feeling around climate and nature, and thereby to produce really kind of useful digital photographs and videos that can be shared with the MP to show the MP that they can go much further in terms of taking action on climate and nature and being much more vocal about it. And that will apply in both in seats where where the MP has already signed our parliamentary call for a televised briefing, and where they haven't. If they haven't, the community can be demonstrating really clearly that they want their MP to do that. And in seats where the MP is already on board and behind it, there's a route there to encouraging the MP to feel capable of doing much more, you know, pushing further. And all of that is really, really dependent on local action. So yeah, local action is really clearly built in, and we're aiming to lay out a really clear pathway for people to be able to carry that out.
Thank you, Ben. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to come to any more questions at this stage. So please, would you write your questions down? I'm also aware that I've only asked questions of two men, but they were the first two to put their hands. So
I noted that.
Pardon?
I noted that.
Yes, absolutely. And so, Martha, you're on my list to come back to later.
Thank you. All right. Okay.
Thank you. So if we can now move to Kate, and I think you might have had a point as well to raise about what Ben said, or straight into your presentation. And we'll go on now till about one. Well, let's see how you go, Kate.
Thanks, Linda. And thank you, Ben, for your contributions. Thank you for joining us. That's fantastic. I'm just putting my timer on. So I am Kate from Greener Henley. I just first of all want to thank obviously Ben for joining us, and Catherine for hosting, and Linda for facilitating. I'm really grateful for your help. This is very much a team effort. Greener Henley, for those of you who don't know our organisation, is a climate and nature action charity based in Henley-on-Thames. We work with residents, schools, businesses and community organisations to take practical action. And our aim is very much to secure mass community engagement on climate and nature action within our community. The purpose of our organisation is to help to secure a livable future for people and planet for now and for generations to come. And we do this around 4 key projects that we run. The first one we call, we encourage people to take a pledge for the planet. So we have on our website, we have a platform with 10 different categories of actions that people can take, ranging from food, energy, transport, nature, resilience, and so on. And we encourage them to take a pledge in relation to that. And then we also encourage businesses and organisations and people with wide audiences to take a pledge and then share it with their audiences. So it's very much about building a broad coalition across the town to take action. But crucially, we measure that action. So we measure all of the pledges that are taken. In due course, when we hope to get more funding, we would like to follow up people on their pledges and then hold them accountable for the pledges that they've made. But we don't have enough resources for that at the moment. But we very much focus on the action being measurable. The second initiative that we run is we work with schools. We've just launched our Green Futures Awards for schools, which is a bronze, silver, gold tiered award. It's the first schools award scheme in the country to embed resilience at the heart of it. And we announced our first cohort of schools last week, and we've got 12 schools on board. We hope to get 20 by the end of the year and probably 40 by the end of next year. So the work with schools is really, really speeding ahead. Then we have a campaign called Nature Squared, where we encourage people to plant 1 square metre or more of wildflowers or plants to create a green corridor across the town. And we educate about the climate emergency, the nature emergency, sorry, off the back of that. And finally, we do various outreach events online, but also events in person. So coming on to this event, so this is one of our outreach events that we're doing, the community resilience briefing, and this is the model that we are sharing with you, but it's just one model, and you will know what model is best for your community. So our objective for this event is twofold. First of all, we want to facilitate understanding about the true scale and urgency of the emergency. We know that people know that there is climate change, that there are issues around nature, but we're not sure that people really truly understand how serious it is. And secondly, as Ben alluded to, we really want to make sure that we are providing the options for people about what actions they can take. We don't want to bring people in the room, show them a very alarming film, and then just leave them hanging. We want to really empower them and give them agency to take action, because we know that if people know that there is a crisis, an emergency happening, but then they feel that they have no agency, people feel really paralysed and they just disengage. So providing the options for what actions people can take is really, really important. So we have decided to hold our event during Great Big Green Week. One of the reasons for that is it gives us a little bit more time to design the event, to invite the people we want to invite, and I'll come on to that because our event is going to be on the 10th of June. But secondly, Great Big Green Week, which is a national event, I'm sure all of you know about Great Big Green Week, run by the Climate Coalition. That event is all about encouraging communities to take action on climate and nature and celebrating that action that they're taking. So I think that it really kind of aligns with what we're trying to do for this event. I only have 9 slides, don't worry, I don't have too many slides. So why are we doing an invitation-only event? Well, we first of all want to break outside of the echo chamber. So we don't want to speak to our loyal audience. We really want to reach people who we haven't reached before, or perhaps people who we have reached, but they've not fully engaged and they're not really taking action. Secondly, we really want to target the leaders of these local organisations. We need to work with trusted messengers who can carry a message to their audience, because when we speak, people won't always listen to us. So we need to engage people to speak, to send the messages that we want to send to their own audiences. And that then cascades action down within their own organisations. It's how we reach more people. And finally, and connected to those 2 points, we really need to scale up the response. We need to get thousands of people involved in hundreds of different organisations across the town, schools, businesses, community groups, sports clubs, and so on. And that's very much about building a broad coalition of local organisations. So if we bring leaders of those organisations into the room, they're better equipped to do that. So who are we going to invite? Now, this is a list that I've put together and we're still working on it. You may come up with more groups here. I'm not going to read out each one of these, and I can make these slides available after if that's helpful. But I think that all of these groups on the list are really critical groups for us to get involved with. There may be some that you wouldn't expect to see there, like, for example, mother and baby groups, which I think are really, really important because, you know, those people are really thinking about, you know, brought a new baby into the world, what kind of future are they going to have? I think GPs are really important. We're fortunate to have a small hospital here in Henley. Faith, again, really important. So I'd be interested to know if you think we've missed any groups off there. We are in the process of compiling our list of invitees at the moment, and Imogen is helping me with that is on this call. So the format of the event, I'm going to just briefly talk through timing. Linda, how are we doing for time? I think I've got I've got about 8 minutes left, I think.
Yeah, 8 minutes.
So we want to give people the opportunity to network and mingle and chat to people at this event. it's going to be, you know, an interesting room full of people. So we're proposing that we open the doors half an hour before the event starts. We need to pin down all the details still, but we will no doubt be providing some light refreshments, some nibbles and things for people to pick on, and probably some tea and coffee and maybe a little bit of wine or something for people to drink. We will have a brief welcome at the beginning, and then we'll be showing the 50-minute film. We want to have, you'll see I've said there's a bridge in between the film and the workshop. We just need to pin down exactly what this looks like, but we didn't want to go directly from the film straight into the workshop. We kind of wanted to sort of take a moment to sort of pause. There will be a lot of, you know, serious issues addressed in the film, although they're going to be doing it in a really creative way in the sort of Gogglebot style that Ben has described. But we think we just want to kind of pause for a moment, and we thought we would take the opportunity there just to explain to people what Greener Henley does and what actions we have on the table that we are going to be proposing to them, so that they are already thinking about these actions when they go into their small groups. So then we're going to have a 40-minute workshop. Mike Barry, who's our chair, who's on this call, is going to be one of our facilitators. We have another facilitator. So Mike and Kate are going to be facilitating this workshop. And during the course of that workshop, they're going to be dividing people into small groups. We think 5 or 6 people per group. We will have a small group facilitator within each group as well. And those small group conversations are very much going to be around what landed with you, and what can you take back to your organisation, and what action do you think that you could take within your organisation? Now, I am going to come on to actions in a moment, but that is the broad kind of topic for the small group conversations. We will then reconvene in the large group for 15 minutes. We will have one person probably feeding back from each small group to the large group sessions, so each group can hear what other things the other groups talked about. We haven't pinned this down yet, but we would like to have a local filmmaker at the event, creating a sort of 2-3 minute film of the event, not filming everything everybody's saying, but creating a short kind of summary of the event. And one of the ideas is it's a nice thing at these events to invite people to speak to camera and make their commitment to camera. There will be some people in the room who are ready to do that, and then there will be some people who are not ready to do that, and they will need to go back and consult with the people within their organisations before they say anything publicly. So that's all I'm going to say about the format now, and some of you may have some questions, but I'm going to move on because of time. Before I get into the specific actions, what I wanted to say about actions, and I already mentioned this at the beginning, is it's really, really important for the actions to be visible and measurable. Visible as far as they can be, and measurable for all sorts of reasons. I've listed 4 here. So it shows people that action is normal and achievable. It normalises the action. It motivates and inspires other people to join in. It helps to generate press stories. The press want to know how many businesses have developed a business continuity plan, a resilience plan. They want to know numbers, and it makes the story more powerful. And perhaps most importantly, and as Ben has alluded to as well at the beginning, it demonstrates to decision makers, so to councillors, to regional councillors, to our MP, that this community is ready for transformative change. So the MP can go to Westminster and say, thousands of people in my constituency are doing X, Y, Z. So what actions do we hope to see? We're trying to keep this as simple as possible. We are still working on it. So we do still need to pin down some details. But we want to essentially do 2 things locally, and then there's the parliamentary call for the televised emergency briefing element of it that Ben discussed. So the first one is we really want organisations to commit to plan for resilience. We think, and I'm sure Rupert, you will agree that this is the right approach here. We think that guiding people towards resilience and adaptation is the right way to take this, because it gets people to really focus on how is my local town going to be affected, my local area going to be affected? How am I going to ensure the that my business will be able to continue to run in light of escalating flash floods, supply chain issues, and so on, power outages? So we think that is the right angle to take. So we would like organisations to commit to plan for resilience. We actually do have a business resilience event that we're putting on at Henley Business School on the 18th of March. And that is all going to be about planning for resilience. Now, we are a small charity, very limited in resources and funding. What we will probably do, because of our limitations, is just have a Google form with a QR code where people can zap the QR code, go to the Google form and make a commitment to planning for resilience and detail what elements they think they need to build into their resilience plan. It'll be a free form box, but we are still working on this. But we do need to come up with what we would like to get out of it is how many businesses came to the event and are now planning for resilience. The second thing is we will encourage organisations to take a pledge for the planet. One of the 10 categories in our Pledge for the Planet platform is resilience. I will go on to the next slide, which will show you that in a second. And the third one there, so we will explain to our audience that the National Emergency Briefing is inviting MPs to sign this parliamentary call for a televised emergency briefing. Now, Henley's MP has already signed that, so that work is done, but we will let the organisations know that that is what they're asking for and that our MP has already signed. There may be one or two people in the room from just across the river, which is Buckinghamshire, so that might be relevant to some people in the room. This is just a screenshot of our website. Our website is currently under redevelopment at the moment, so this is going to change and become much more intuitive for people to use. But these are the green tabs at the top of the different categories, and we're on the resilience tab there. So there are 3 resilience pledges for the planet: be flood ready, beat the heat, and get connected. We will encourage the organisations in the room to take one of these pledges if possible, but we don't want to just limit it to those 3 things. But the organisations in the room may want to be looking at other things, which is why we talked about the resilience plan as well. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you can ask me in the questions.
Just to let you know time, Kate, it's 36 minutes.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly skip this last slide. This is the last slide. So we're happy to share our event workshop resources, the facilitator briefing, the commitment form, which I explained. We're inviting people to make a commitment. And then we have the actions handout, which will sort of set out what actions they can take clearly for them. And we're also going to develop, we're doing this with some scientists, we're going to develop a climate impact summary so they can see what kind of impacts Henley is going to be subjected to: overheating, flash flooding, direct and indirect risks. And we are happy for other groups to use the content of our Pledge for the Planet website platform. We would like you to credit us if you do use it. And we're also going to create toolkits for each of our pledges. And we are happy to, again, provide those to other groups that are interested in having them. They are Henley specific in some places, so you would need to modify them if you wanted to use them. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm mindful I've skipped through that quite quickly. There may be some things that are unclear, so please do ask questions.
Thank you. That's a great presentation. Thank you, Kate. Did a great job at getting a lot of information across in a really understandable way. Let's come to Martha. Martha, is your question still there?
Thank you very much. Yeah, just very quickly, we're still undecided. This has been interesting about whether to do the big event for everybody or the little focused one, and we're still mulling that over, so it's useful hearing about this. I think if we did the bit, obviously if you do the targeted one to leaders, businesses, councillors, that's a little bit easier because you're hoping they will quickly understand what it's all about. National emergency briefing, I'm just thinking if you were going out to a wider audience, because some of us were thinking of having a big venue locally, like part of our local cinema or something, and getting as many people in there as possible. I'm not quite sure how that would work with discussion groups. And also the title's slightly alarming. Well, it is alarming, obviously everything's alarming, but it's whether how the local population would respond to this title, there would have to be much more information or something of just how you would promote it to a bigger population? Or does people generally think that initially you have to have this small invited group and then before you go out to the bigger community? So I don't know, that's for both of the presenters, really.
And Ben's gone, unfortunately. Have to go to another
has he?
meeting. So
I'll answer that. So we actually do, in Henley, we do screenings at our local cinema that we call green screens of environmental films plus panel discussions. We do, they're brilliant and they've been really successful and they often sell out. I have noticed that there are frequently the same people coming to those events. I think that I think if you have sufficient resources to be able to organise an invite-only event, I think you reach people you would not normally reach, and then you also multiply your effect, because I would hope that with, there'll be 55 leaders in the room from probably, hopefully 50 different organisations. I would hope that some of those organisations will organise screenings themselves. It may be that they're a large business that organises screenings for their employees or whatever. So I think that you are going to reach, if you're going to put some of your resources into organising an event, my position would be that you will get a bigger multiplier effect if you do an invite-only screening, because you are creating a whole sort of army of ambassadors in the room who are then going to take the message out to all of their audiences. And many of these people that come into the room won't necessarily be kind of environmentally minded people.
Yeah, definitely.
That's that bad, So that would be my thought on it.
That's really interesting, because in some many ways that's easier to organise. And you were asking about your list and whether you had anybody. We've got a business improvement district, which is a grouping of businesses. I don't know whether that was on your list or whether you have anything similar in Henley. Okay,
that's a good one to add.
Thank you. Nell, can we come to you? Nell in Seaford.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for all the work you're putting into this. It's so encouraging to know we're going to get a guide. All the resources have been brilliant right from the start, so thank you. We're doing a kind of drip approach, so we're starting with a few showings in the constituency and just sort of building up to whatever it ends up being. So I do like the idea of an invite only. I think my question is really about, I think, a need to not rush ahead too far in the discussions, because we'll have people there who've only heard this stuff, and we all know how long it takes to process. My dog's just fallen off the table. We all know how long it takes to process this information, and I do feel that to be attending something where it's the first time you've actually been party to some of this information, and then to be plunged into what are we going to do about it, puts us back into the many cycles that we've all been through already, potentially. So I think we're thinking of taking a slightly gentler approach, particularly for the public meeting, and just having, space, and then maybe a conversation, quite an open conversation, People's Assembly style-y, about where we take it next, and for that to be encouraged about actually how are we going to take this to other citizens, because otherwise you're going to get silos of people taking it forward and faltering in the same way that they have all those other times before. So I think that was just a word of caution to myself, really. This has been really useful to think it through. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
Thank you. I'll just hand back to Kate. Is there anything you'd like to say to that, Kate? Respond to Martha.
I think you've got to do what you feel is right for your community. I mentioned when I was talking that in my experience, when we do present people with some information and then they don't feel that they have any agency, I feel that is problematic. So that's why
build that in, so there'd be channels on from the meeting. But I'm just a little concerned that if we plunge into action planning before people have really absorbed it, there might be some risks there. So we can probably manage that.
there may be. We actually have. I don't know if Mike is one of our facilitators. He's somewhere in here. I don't know if Mike, you want to say anything about that. I mean, I think that's the skill of the facilitators as well, to kind of hold the space and read the room as well. And Mike and Kate, who are facilitating for us, are very skilled facilitators, and that's I hope they will be able to manage that.
And Kate, if I can ever so briefly add to that, every community is unique, every individual is unique, every business and organisation within it is unique, and I think our community, very occasionally we talk a little too much, we broadcast at. And we found great benefit from starting a conversation and sitting back and listening and guiding. And on that note, I'll stop speaking.
Thank you, Mike. I am facilitating, but I just do want to add that we've been working on a facilitator guide, looking at the skills and the core conditions that facilitators can create, whatever the kind of shape of their own discussion group. And we will be rolling that out. It's a little simple framework, just some attention points really about where you pay attention to make sure that the inner response of people is as managed as managed is probably the wrong word, is acknowledged, that there will be emotional responses, and that you need to find a way to help people to move through those stages. And that might not happen on the day. There may be people who need to go away and think about it. So we'll be announcing the framework shortly and sharing some sessions, an open invitation for people to come along and think through this framework and see if it will be useful for you or to adapt it for your setting. We'll be doing that shortly. I think I've got Sue next on the list.
Hi. It was interesting what Nell's saying. I wonder if there should be a follow-up meeting, or, I mean, definitely people need something that they can sign up so that they're in a group again. I'm thinking of how Extinction Rebellion have done things, and then they've formed these very tight-knit, happy cells of people. So what I wanted to ask about, well, the Henley pledges are brilliant. They are Henley pledges, and it's all beautifully laid out. Is there a way that you can transfer those into some non-Henley place, like the NEB briefing place? Has that got its own website, that we can just have it as national pledges that we can all go with, for the one thing? And the other thing is, how easy will it be once we've shown the film? How easy is it for us to get it and show it? You know, what kind of formats do we need? And then how easily can we just give it to other people so they can show it to their people? So that's 2 questions, please.
So on the pledges, Sue, I'm not a technical person, but we did think, oh, wouldn't it be brilliant if this was a national platform? And then we realised actually it's really important for us to keep hold of our information, because the information is it's relevant to our local area. So each group needs to have the information that's relevant to their local area. So we couldn't find a way to work with another group that was national that would hold our local information. So we are very happy to let other groups use our structure and our wording of our pledges. You will need to change, like I say, for example, our Pause on Plastic pledge refers to our local refill shop. So obviously you wouldn't be signposting people towards a Henley refill shop. So you would need to slightly change the wording of them, but you're very, very happy to take that wording, but you would either need to host those on your own website, or you could perhaps just do it in an easier way, like on a Google form or something, if you didn't have a website. But I'm afraid that we can't kind of host nationally, and I am sure that the NEB will tell you that they can't host nationally because it's too far off their core focus, which is this film and the parliamentary call. On the second thing, how easy is it to watch the film? My understanding is that they're not just going to put this onto YouTube, because the whole point is that they want groups to organise screenings across the UK. So you can go onto their website and you can register to host a screening. I mean, I expect that in a long time, it will eventually get put up on a YouTube channel somewhere. But the process at the moment is that you have to register to host a screening. Does that answer your question, Sue?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. And just to say, there is an interactive map being developed where the public and you can go online look at the map, find where your local screening is already registered, or register one yourself. And that will also be helpful for you to find other places that are doing it and maybe cooperate with other places. Plus, of course, all the institutions and the larger organisations that are already looking at doing those NEB hostings as well, those briefing hostings. Chris Church, to you.
Thank you. I'd like to come back on what happens afterwards. I think we should recognise that this is not something brand new. 80% of the British public are deeply concerned about climate change, according to the polls. It's 15 years or more since we passed the Climate Act. And pretty much every local council has got a climate plan of some nature. Most have got staff working on climate. The diocese, the bishops mostly have got climate workers. There are thousands of people doing this stuff already. And to imagine that we're just going to come along and say, hey, you should have a plan, without understanding what plans are there already, is likely to fall on kind of deaf ears, unless I'm really suggesting that people who are showing spend some time talking to the people who are working on climate already. Local authorities, dioceses, education, universities, national health, NHS hospitals have got environmental officers. All those people need to understand where this fits in with them if they're going to take it out and promote it. And just coming in and saying, hey, we've got something new. There's been films before that have tried to do this, and people have come along, smiled, listened, got worried, gone away, and not actually done very much. And the other point I'd really make is that if we want to get outside the bubble, it's all very well going to kind of important people, but there's a huge voluntary and community sector everywhere that the environmental movement, by and large, is very bad at engaging with. Community associations, all sorts of bodies. And really talking to councils for voluntary action or community first networks, people like that, and really getting those people on board so that this can actually get to the people who are worried but aren't doing anything. Basically, please do some homework before the meet film so that you understand what the councillors are going to be talking about, because they've already got their climate plans and so on.
Thanks, Chris. Linda, shall I?
Yes, please.
Come in there? And then perhaps Mike, you might want to add some thoughts. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for everything that you're doing in Oxford. What's different about this project and this event now? I'm just going to talk about Henley because that's what I know. So we have some fantastic work going on in Henley. Henley Town Council is doing some really brilliant work. It's one of the only first councils, I think, to employ a biodiversity officer. We've got some schools around our area doing some really great work. I think what we're saying is we need to ramp that up massively. We need to see mass community engagement in Henley. We need to see thousands of people taking action and treating this like the emergency it is. So we need to move into a different realm of action, and that will then spill out into all different areas, and it will equip our decision makers, our councillors, our MPs to speak with more force in the places that they're in at Westminster and so on. So that is very much our focus in Henley. I do acknowledge that there's wonderful work being done. There's great work that Oxfordshire County Council are doing, for example. You talked about community sectors. Again, great work happening there, but we do need to reach these other sectors who are perhaps either not as aware or not as engaged. And that's very much what this event is all about. I don't know, Mike, if you want to add anything there.
No, it's a brilliant question, Chris. So in 30 seconds, we're looking at a mapping tool that helps us understand all the relationships across the totality of the Henley community. Some of those official, the council, the emergency services, the doctor's surgery, but so many of them are unofficial and can be invisible if we don't go looking for them and make the connection between them and other entities. So we're trying to understand how our community interacts with each other and how one organisation's message can reinforce those of many around them as well. So I won't say any more than that, but it's a spot on point you make, Chris.
If I can
Thank
just
you,
come
Mike.
back for 10 seconds, Henley is one of the richest communities in Britain. This has to work in Middlesbrough, in Sunderland, and all those other places. So I think people really need to think, how do we actually make this relevant to the people who are worried about getting to next week rather than to 10 years' time?
And Chris, again, really valuable point. I spent a lot of my time in retail working across the food system, dealing with many of those communities. And you're absolutely right. We're not sat here as Henley saying we have the answer for all of you. I think what we put in front of you is a provocation. What it means in different communities across the UK will be very, very different. Absolutely humble in front of that challenge.
Thank you. And I'm afraid we've got time for one last question, and that's going to be Andy Middleton.
Great, thanks, Linda. Just completely echo what Chris was saying a minute ago. I think there's an essential level of humility that's important in putting these screenings on, of assuming that you're not doing anything new in those communities and that other people are already doing what you're doing and further ahead. Because there's nothing that pisses people off more than people riding over the hills on white horses. And I think there's just a couple of bits of experience from, I'm based in Wales and was heavily involved in developing the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And we had a national conversation about the Wales we want. And it fundamentally didn't work because what was missing was the Wales you're going to get anyway. And that's the Wales that's not part of the briefing about things like demographics or the climate change that's going to happen, regardless of whether you like it or not. So helping people understand, because there's nothing that dissipates agency than being told that what you want isn't actually possible. So in 2042, there'll be twice as many of the people on these screens, there will be twice as many old people than there are today. And with the smallest workforce there's ever been. It's going to be a crisis in geriatric care. And on top of everything else we're doing, so really important that people understand the wider social context, regardless of the changes that we're allowed to make. And I think what I've not been seeing on the WhatsApp groups enough yet is that sense of asking the people who are the leaders of your health boards and councils and so on to say, what's keeping you awake at night in this space? Our job is to help people sleep better. And they still have nightmares, as Rupert knows. But there's kind of a sense of how do we help people do the things that they're already trying to do? And certainly from the people I talk to, they never ever get asked those questions by most of the people who are part of this community, because there's not, the access isn't there. But helping people do what they want to do, so to create the capacity in our communities to implement the plans they already know, feels so important. And just walk gently and with humility, because as Chris says, there are people already working on this full time and have been doing so for decades. This isn't a new conversation. And as Rupert says, it's more than an emergency as well. This is a readjustment of everything we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm afraid on that note, but it was a very, very timely note, I think, about these reminders, is we'll bring this to a close. We've got 4 minutes just to hand over to Kate, just wrapping up. I'm sorry to those who asked questions or wanted to ask questions and I didn't get to you. If you want to put them in the chat or in the Google Doc, please do, and we'll make sure that we can come back to you on those. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks very much, Linda. It would be interesting to get some thoughts about if there are any next steps here. Greener Henley, as I said on my last slide, is happy to share the resources that we have for this session. We need to think about how we share those resources, because you're all from different groups. I would imagine, I think, Catherine, have you managed to set up a Google Doc? Because we could perhaps put links to the resources in that document.
Yeah, we will send that around after the event, along with the recording. We capture the questions and resources that people have put in the chat, and we'll compile that into a document.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. So could we, in due course, Catherine, when the resources are ready, would we be able to do a follow-up to the email addresses who've registered for this event with any event materials?
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Is there any other next steps that people would like to propose? I had proposed this as a one-off drop-in Zoom, just so we could share what we were doing in Henley in case that was helpful for anybody. But I'm curious to know if there are any other suggestions as to what we might do for next steps. Martha, I think you've got your hand up.
Well, I suppose it's more to do with promoting and involving the community, because I am a local councillor, a district councillor, and I've been thinking about putting a motion to my council about getting them all involved to get them, but that's not really a next step. It's about what we're doing now, I suppose, really. But I do have a concern about how you get out to the average person that's just, you know, overwhelmed with the cost of living, etc. You meet advocates and supporters, and how do you get those communities involved? I mean, we're not a poor area, but we do have pockets of deprivation, and I just feel those people are going to be left out, really.
Thank you, Martha. We've got one more minute. I know that Chris and David have both got their hands up. David, do you want to make a very quick comment if you've got a next step?
Yes. Just first of all, I just wanted to say that regarding this film showing, we need to get we need to get together in our local group in order to discuss ways of taking this forward. Secondly, I want to mention the Climate and Nature Bill, which appears not to have been mentioned at this meeting. It's very important to keep pushing our MPs to bring the bill further up the parliamentary agenda. It has been dropped in this session of Parliament, but it hasn't been dropped altogether. We want to get it raised in the next session of Parliament.
Thank you, David.
Please.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We have run out of time. You can always, if you organise a workshop, you can obviously put that as an action to ask your MP to support it. In Henley, our MP does support that bill, so that's why it's not an action